My name's Giles Foden. I'm the author of a number of novels about Africa, including The Last King of Scotland, Ladysmith, Zanzibar, and another novel that's not so much set in Africa called Turbulence. I teach creative writing at the University of East Anglia, and the reason I've come to Arche this year is to participate in a panel called Men Who Write Women. That was very exciting, if a slightly terrifying prospect at a festival devoted to feminism, to be the sacrificial lamb on stage. But as it turned out, it was a very interesting and exciting panel, along with my co-panelists Ishmael Beyer and Tony Can. I think we only really probably scratched the surface of that enormous topic of how you represent a gender different to your own. But our host, Zuki Zwawana, was very smart in the way she set up the questions, and I think we kind of made a little ground anyway. While I can see we all of us discussed the limitations of that, I think there was a general feeling that it would be a sad thing if men never wrote about women. One amusing question that came up was, do you ever ask female friends about descriptions of women in your writing? And that produced quite a lot of amusing answers. What else? I think one of the issues was the question of a narrator, that you might have a male narrator who adopts a certain perspective to a female character in the novel, but that male narrator doesn't necessarily represent or align with the views of a male writer, so that's something we began to get it onto that. And while I certainly think there's a kind of structural imbalance in all discourse, from whether it's a history book or a piece of fictional writing, I think the flip side of that really is that a novel may begin with that kind of perspective, but if it's any good, the novel's any good, the female character will develop in a way that goes against the prejudicial alignments of the story in a way. And certainly in one of my novels, there's someone who seems as if, the one we discussed, Turbulence, there's someone who's a female character who seems as if she is a romantic kind of a sidekick really to the narrator, but actually, as it turns out, she's the one who solves the mathematical conundrum at the center of the book. And so I think sometimes plot can actually help us, because plot demands action, whether it be by a female character or by a male character, and try to engage fully with the character as you would engage, as you ought to engage fully with a woman whom you meet in ordinary life. And I think and I don't think it's just as simple as that either, because I think there are structures in language itself, there are structures in the generic histories of different literary forms that work against that. So it's an effort, it's a task. Of course I do believe in feminism. I think, however, that it's not for men to say what feminism is, and I think probably it could be many different things. When I saw the lineup at the festival, I did notice that it was predominantly women, and a lot of them were well-known, distinguished, vocal, interesting, exciting feminist activists, and I thought there's a slight hostage to fortune turning up as a man at such a festival. But in fact, it's been wonderfully welcoming and enlightening for me too. My favourite colour is blue, in particular the blue that one sees on inland African lakes such as Lake Malawi, Lake Tanganyika, Lake Victoria, around which I spent much of my childhood. And I think getting back to that blue is one of the reasons I still return to Africa so often. I'm interested in writing about Africa largely because I've spent probably more of my life on this continent than I have in Europe or any other place. My family moved to Malawi from the UK in 1971, and really for the next 30 years we were living in places in Central and East Africa such as Tanzania, Uganda, and then also we lived a short while in Ethiopia and Nigeria. So I think those experiences have been the drivers, the nourishing sources of all my writing. It's obviously very exciting for a writer to have one of his novels adapted, and that's what happened in the case of my first novel, The Last King of Scotland, which is about Idi Amin and his doctor, in inverted commas, I suppose. It was an amazing experience. It took a very long time, 10 years really, from the first kind of agreements between myself and the filmmakers. And there were many ups and downs on the way. But when it finally happened, it was enormously exciting, largely because it was filmed in Uganda. And it was very nearly filmed in South Africa for various sort of financial reasons. But the fact that it was filmed in Uganda meant that there was a tremendous historical electricity really in the production. And I'll give you a good example of that. There's a scene in the film where Armin orders a Air Force marshal to be taken off to be killed, as so often happened. And that role of the Air Force marshal was played by an amazing actor whose own father was killed by Armin. So you've got this sort of fantastically rich but also quite dangerous, I suppose, connection between actual events, history, facts that must always be distinguished from fiction, and the representation of those facts with appropriate modulation. So that was very, very, very exciting.